Welcome to Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends, the podcast where we explore life, career, relationships, and pop culture through a Christian conservative perspective. Each episode, we dive into deep topics that matter most to us women, from navigating your career with grace and confidence to watering meaningful relationships grounded in faith. We're here to empower you to embrace your femininity and stand firm in your beliefs. We'll also tackle the latest in pop culture, discussing how they align or clash with our values. Let's uncover the truth and encourage each other to live boldly and authentically. So whether you're at home or on your commute, get ready for some fabulous conversations. Grab your teacup, pour yourself some tea. Come on, girlies, we're changing culture. The views expressed on this podcast are our own and do not reflect our employers. Enjoy! You are now about to listen to part 2 of this 2-part episode. If you have not listened to part 1, I would suggest listening to that first and then come over to listen to part 2. My next question, let me go back to a lot of the questions from what you said. Let me look at my notes. So can you explain how the website worked exactly? Is it kind of like Tinder? Is it like Plenty of Fish or all the other ones?
Yeah, exactly. They tout themselves as a dating website, and that's where they exist in this gray area when they're telling everyone they're just a dating website, just like any other. But the reality is there's money being exchanged, so it's not a website like any other. And back when I was working there, like you remember, the marketing was very overt about money being exchanged, dollar signs, and sugar daddy lingo, sugar baby lingo. But now, if you look at the website, they've completely stripped any of that from the website now because they don't want to get legally implicated, because there is actually new legislation that was passed that forbids these type of websites. But that's the thing is people join thinking it's a dating website. And so it basically functions as a dating website. So you join, you set your profile up, you message people, you engage in your own conversations and interactions. And somewhere along the way, the man asks you how much it costs to have sex with you.
Oh, wow. That would be startling, especially if you really just think it's a dating website. That would be startling. So we talked about the age and the occupations of the sugar daddies. Now, what do a lot of the girls look like age-wise and professions and stuff like that?
I think the average age when I was working there was something like 22 or 23. And they're most commonly students because that's who our marketing directly targeted. Through the Sugar Baby University pitch, but also because students are broke. They are usually paying for their own school. They're not able to have full-time jobs because they are students. So that was the most common occupation. There was a lot of single moms and a lot of 18-year-olds or even younger than 18, because at the time I was working there, there was no age verification process. So basically anyone could join the website and just click here if you're 18. And yeah, so that was a really terrible part of it, that, moms would find out their child is on this website and she would email us and say like, hey, can you get my kid off the website? And so we would get the girl off the website, but she could easily just make another profile because it's entirely anonymous. So it was, very bad, very bad.
Wow. That's awful. But now do they have kind of like more safeguards, do you think? Or is it kind of, I guess it's, you make more money if there aren't safeguards, realistically.
Precisely, because a lot of these men like very young girls, and it's a lot more men than I think we care to admit. And I don't know what they do on the website now. I really only know what they did while I was there, because I don't go on the website because it's frankly like traumatizing and disgusting. So I only know what happened while I was working there. And while I was working there, it was just like, choose your birth year, and then you choose your birth year, and then you get to join the site.
And think about all of us when we got Facebook. I remember I got Facebook in high school. Or no, I think I got Facebook when I was 18, but one of my friends had Facebook since she was like 10 or something. And I remember when I joined, it said she was like 60. Because, you just pick a random age.
Right.
It's just, anyway, that's terrible. Let's see. What were some of the men, like, were they kind of like advertising what they were looking for in girls? Or was it kind of like did they ever, whenever you talk to any of the men that work or that sugar daddies, were they like,
oh, I want this specific type of girl? I know you mentioned they wanted young girls, but was there something else, I guess, that was kind of like a target?
I mean, all of them have their own personal preferences, but yeah, I mean, they, especially like at the parties, we would, if a sugar daddy bought a table at one of our parties that we threw, he would ask like for short Latinas or petite blonde girls or something like
Wow.
that, or
That's
like whatever he
specific.
was into.
Yeah,
But there was actually a lot of racism on the site
I believe
because
that.
yeah, because they didn't ever advertise this when I was working there, and I'm sure they wouldn't like advertise it now, but the majority of sugar baby profiles were Black women. And
Really?
yeah, which I found very interesting at the time.
That is
And
fascinating.
it took me a long time to kind of maybe understand why that is. And like now I think it's a bit more clear that like, lack of generational wealth and just like
Hmm.
being marginalized and targeted and the culture or whatever, like kind of leads them to turn to this lifestyle more
Yeah.
often. But the result of that was that there were so many Black women on the site that the Black women would reach out to different sugar daddies and would hit them up, just like any other girl would like hit up people. But because there were more Black women, the sugar daddies would get many messages from Black women. And so they would say things on their profiles that were like overtly racist, like, I only date within my own race, or no Black women, please. And it was like what were we going to do about that? Like,
Yeah.
it's obviously rude and terrible,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also it's like, I guess people are like inclined to like whatever they want to
Yeah, it's
like.
your preference.
Yeah, but it's just also so like wrong and
Yeah.
rude. And it also led specifically Black women to be victimized at a higher rate because there are more of them. And because there were men who Bertley didn't want that. So then I feel like other men would target them because they think, oh, well, they're not getting as much attention because there are so many of them and there are so many to choose from, which is like totally messed up.
Yeah.
But that's just what I witnessed and like the anecdotes that I heard. So I mean, everyone like got victimized and preyed upon, but just because there were more of them, I feel like that led to, insult to injury, them getting preyed upon more. So that's another terrible aspect.
That's so fascinating. I didn't even really think about the race aspect because even thinking of like in college I went on a date with this guy once that was white, and in the middle of the date so like the opposite, like the same type of racism but the opposite direction. This white guy was saying how he only likes Black girls. He cannot date a white, and it was weird. It made me very uncomfortable. I'm like, I just want to, like, why are we even talking about this? Like, I'd rather you just like me for me. Like, you don't have to talk about your own race like that. It was just weird. So I'm wondering if that type of stuff happened too. And like, I know that statistically on other websites too, like Asian women are preyed upon a lot, and like for like racial things. And that I didn't even think about that aspect. And I'm sure it's like amplified in like different ways when money's involved and when it's, people with low moral character. I mean, I don't know how to describe these men other than low moral character. That is so, I didn't even think about that aspect. So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and to be clear, there were plenty of men who did like Black women. It wasn't that wasn't something that anyone liked. Like, I mean, there were plenty that did, but
Yeah.
I think that the overt racism came from the people who weren't interested in them because they were getting inundated with messages. So yeah, it was just kind of this weird situation that happened that, I mean, yeah, and I think that's weird too when people like, it's okay to like what you like that's
Right.
fine. But
Right.
then at the same time, it's like sometimes you like something that you didn't expect you would like, or like maybe that
Yeah.
person is not your type, but you really do vibe with them. So I don't know. I think it's weird when people set up such parameters, especially based on race, because it just like has nothing to do with like person's moral character, like you were saying.
100%. I like have preferences, I guess, but like I personally don't get that. Like I don't have any preferences personally. Anybody listening? No, I'm just joking. Um, but I don't get that, and I'm just thinking of like everything when you add money like to anything, it always amplifies it. Like money is just the one thing that people go crazy about. So I'm sure it was just like the people who were victimized in that regard. I'm sure it was awful. But that also leads me now to I'm thinking about this. We've only been talking about the men being the daddies and the women being the babies. While you were working there, did you ever see sugar mamas and sugar babies with boys or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there were male sugar babies on the site. I mean, most of them were gay, but there were like
Okay, yeah, that.
there are like a handful of sugar mommies, and usually it would be a couple that was like with a sugar mommy profile. And I mean, there just are not very many of them. And I mean, if you think about it, like a rich woman like doesn't really need a website to go like find a
No.
man to spoil. I think men are just more willing to sleep with whoever as opposed to like an older guy who like is creepy or crusty or like whatever, like a young girl's not going to go for him.
Yeah.
So, but also like men, our biology dictates that we like to be monogamous. So
Yep.
we want to find one man to sleep with. And if a sugar mommy did want to go on the website and find one man to sleep with, then she just gets off the website and she has her one man. Whereas the men on the website are looking for multiple women, many women. So
I
they
didn't even
stay
think of that.
on the website more often. And, not to say that the website was 100% bad, because I do know a couple people who found their person and like got married or whatever off the website,
Oh.
but that's like 1%. Like, a broken clock is right twice a day, but the problem with that is the good ones get off the site. They don't stay on the site because they found their person, they're in a relationship, they're off. The bad ones come back again and again, and one predator can hit so many victims. So by definition, there are just so many more victims than there are predators. And because victims are ashamed and the culture of secrecy and discretion keeps them quiet because they are scared of what might happen to them, then the predators are able to go back and do it again. So it's, yeah, so yes, there were sugar mummies, but just very, very rarely.
Okay. That's interesting as well. I keep saying that's interesting just because I don't know what else to say. It's all just so interesting to me. It's really fascinating. And just how this whole kind of network works and just how this exchange of goods and sex and, the different people in it. Cause I'm girls go through and through. So I'm not just that I'm not going to blame the girls. And I'm just thinking of like some of the girls, like, I don't know if you saw, did you ever see the movie Hustlers with,
No, I didn't see it, but I know what you're talking about, where they're
yeah,
like
so,
scamming the men and stuff.
yeah. Well, one of the girls who was a hustler, Lily, she's played by Lily Reinhart from Riverdale. And if in her backstory, if I remember correct, I think her mom kicked her out or her parents died or something, but she was all out on her own, living in a terrible apartment. And like, I just think about that a lot. And, not everybody, because I know sometimes I say that people like, not every woman, sure, not every woman has that story, but I think a lot of people do. And I promise you, no one goes to this website just thinking like, yeah, I'm going to just have a bunch of sex and be used, and who cares? Like, most people are coming like wanting a relationship, who need money, who are like, it's not like people, it's almost out of desperation, I think, a lot of times. And I mean, we can even say that with dating apps. Like, I'll admit, like, I'm on dating apps sometimes for desperation. Like, if I could just find one person. So just, I think that's just something also to remember, the dichotomy between, a sugar baby and a sugar daddy as well. I have two-ish more questions for you. The first one, I was trying to figure out a good segue, but I couldn't find a segue. In the Breaking Points interview, you mentioned that you believe that this is human trafficking. Can you kind of expand on that?
Sure. And that's an important point because it's not always trafficking, but I do know that the website is used by traffickers. And I think I just want to like break those terms down for people because colloquially we hear the term pimp in place of the word sex trafficker, which is what a pimp really is. And it's funny because like P. Diddy, who wrote the song about being a PIMP, is now in prison on sex trafficking charges. So it's like full circle moment. That's what a pimp really is a sex trafficker. And I think people aren't really familiar with what sex trafficking really is a lot of times. They think it's only immigrant children kept in cages being transported across the border and stuff like that. And like that certainly does happen. I'm not discounting that, and it's obviously completely terrible. But more often, especially in America, sex trafficking is done by someone you know or by someone you trust. And what it really is when a procurer, a pimp, usually a man, procures young women or young whoever or just whoever and takes them from one place to another, oftentimes across state lines, to then have them paid for sex. So like, for instance, I was talking about Diddy, like the Diddy parties, right? Like what would happen is a trafficker, a man, would procure sex workers, however he was going to procure them. Maybe he was using a website, maybe he wasn't, and he would bring them to the party and then they would be paid for sex. So that's trafficking. That's trafficking right there.
You're so right. Yeah.
And some people don't, even when they hear that, some people are like, oh my gosh, like I've been sex trafficked. And it's like, yeah, a lot of times trafficking is done to willing participants. And the ones who are complacent and complicit are the ones who are then elevated and given lots of money or business class or status in the music industry or whatever it may be, because they are the ones who are willing to be abused. And I think we're seeing that now with this, age of crumbling celebrity, with the people who have been elevated to these positions of celebrity are often the ones who were victimized and then turn around and do the victimizing. So I think that's kind of an important distinction to make, because like you mentioned earlier as well, it's more nuanced than just grabbing someone and kidnapping them and taking them. Like, no, it's one guy goes on seeking arrangement and finds a bunch of girls to invite to a party, and then all the girls come to the party, and then he finds out what they're willing to do. Are they willing to take drugs? Are they willing to have sex for money? Who's willing to do what? And the ones who are willing are the ones who are then given money or paid or get to meet P. Diddy or whatever it is. I'm just like speaking hypothetically. But that's the real situation of trafficking. And while maybe that is fine because they are willing participants, it gets a lot worse when the person maybe is no longer a willing participant, but the trafficker doesn't want to take that for an answer. So they use tactics of coercion, manipulation, threats to trick someone into doing that, or to force someone into being trafficked. There was this really good show on HBO called The Deuce. I don't know if you ever saw it or heard of it.
I haven't seen that one.
I mean, it wasn't a very big show, but it was such a well done show, and it really shows the nuance of how these traffickers rope, like you said, vulnerable, manipulatable people into these lives, and then sometimes through like abuse and like physical harm, they force them into continuing that lifestyle. But at the same time, they're telling that person like, oh no, I love you, babe. Like, oh, you're my girl, like all of this. And if it's a person who doesn't come from money, like you're saying, like the character in Hustlers, who doesn't have a good relationship to look up on and know that this isn't right. Yeah. A trafficker who is telling her this or telling her that, that's the only time she's ever been told something like that. So it's really, they willingly believe these things, and then they are coerced and threatened and all the rest. So yeah, it's a very nuanced thing. And I think people, a lot of times they hear this word sex trafficking thrown around and they really don't know what it is, or they think they know, but it's many different things. So it's not just one, it's a lot, but most commonly, yeah, it is like someone who you know or trust who convinces you to do that.
I'm so glad you shared this. If you have listened to this podcast before, everyone, you know I say this all the time. You are more likely to be trafficked by someone you know. And I think we as women, I just always think about like the people who will, and no shade to anyone who this has happened to, and it's quite possible, but statistically it's not. People who will go to Target and they'll be like, I saw a wrapper at the near my tire. I think someone's like marking me and things like that. And, you know, that's possible. Once again, no shade, but that's very unlikely. Statistically, that's unlikely. What Brooke said is definitely, statistically, I believe it's like 60% of people who are trafficked by someone that they love, someone that they know. So I think it's also just really important to remember that. And if you are listening and you feel as if something like this has happened to you, please, reach out, tell someone. I think it's important to, talk about these things. We're not done the episode, but I want to say this now specifically since we're talking about it, since it's so heavy. If you feel like something like this has happened, it's really important for you to reach out, tell someone, kind of talk about it with someone you trust, someone that loves and cares about you. Because, I think a lot of people, like you said, don't know that that's what that is. Because TV has also made, like, what's the movie with Liam Neeson? Taken. I think that's what we think human trafficking is. And then, like I said, like the rapper at your will at Target, or, the guy that you've seen twice in line in Target. Once again, I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm just saying like that's statistically not as likely. So I think it's really important for us to just understand and remember this. Pay attention to the company that you keep as well. If someone you're friends with or someone in your friend group is like making you uncomfortable, if you notice this guy's always around and he just comes a little, like, don't get friendly with people who you probably shouldn't be getting friendly with too. That's just another side note.
Well, speaking of statistics, there is a statistic that about a third of trafficking victims met their abuser online as well.
Oh.
So it's a lot of times it's people you know or people you get to know. And a lot of times it's someone you met on a sugar daddy website.
Yeah. So, I want to ask two more questions. One, I want to bring this up. And once again, I didn't know how to transition to this, but another thing that you said that I really liked, you talked a little bit about birth control in that episode. And we on this podcast are anti-birth control for a myriad of reasons, but I think it's really important. The main reason is truly it's not good for us women. Like, it affects us in ways that just were unprecedented. This was a new invention that you can argue was good, and you can argue that if you'd like, but truly it's just not good for our bodies. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, that's kind of like out of left field, I guess, for this episode, but you mentioned that and I really want to talk about that. So can you talk, on the episode you were just saying how, like, you think birth control kind of helps with complacency, and, did you hear about people being on birth? I don't know, just like expand on that. What are your thoughts on that?
The birth control thing was something I came to through my own experience. And I mean, maybe birth control does work for some people, but for me, I realized when I got off of it that I was a completely different person, especially sexually.
I hear that a lot, actually.
Yeah, I do as well. There's actually a lot of like research coming out that it really does like change your brain. And I was, I don't want to say had it forced down my throat, but essentially like at a very young age, my mom was like, get on birth control, because that's just what she was told. And that's what she thought was best for me, because she thought that if I was going to be sexually active, then at least I wouldn't be getting pregnant. But I don't think that, and we've talked about this now and she agrees with me, but what it actually did was it made me more sexually promiscuous, because I knew I couldn't get pregnant, but also the way the hormones affected me was that I was horny and I wanted to have sex. And I think that side effect is something the creators of birth control liked, that they want women to want to have sex and they want them to be overtly sexual, because then men can easily get sex without repercussions. And when I finally got off of it, it was actually after I stopped working for the company, I finally got off of it and I just became such a different person. Like, when I was on it, I had such a short fuse and I was like very quick to cry, just very emotional, like all the time, but especially around my period or my PMSing or whatever. And I wanted to have sex with people who weren't my boyfriend, or like I was like more willing and eager to have sex with someone I wasn't in a relationship with. And after I got off of it, the complete opposite happened for me. Like, now I do not want to have sex at all unless there is someone I want to have sex with. So I don't have like urges. I mean, maybe some people do, but I think it was the birth control that made me wish to have sex. And because your hormones are all out of whack, because your body thinks you're pregnant and all of these other things. So, I think the creators of birth control, they don't want me the way I am now, where I don't want to have sex with someone unless I'm in a relationship with them. They want me to be promiscuous and be out there because sex is a way of controlling women and a way of getting what they want. So, I mean, that's just my personal belief based on my own experience. I mean, people have to do what's right for them.
Right.
But when I was young, when I was 15, I think, I got the Depo-Provera shot, which is
At
like
15, The
Yeah.
shot? Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is like a birth control. It was like kind of new at the time, I think. And it made me absolutely crazy. Like it just like made me off the handle, you know. And like
Oh,
at
wow.
15, you're already a little crazy. And
Yeah.
so after it was over, it was 3 months basically that I was like a basket case. And we went to the doctor, and my mom was like, oh, well, I guess you're going to have to try something else. Like, I mean, at that point, it should have been like, well, you know, maybe birth control is not right for you. Like, maybe you shouldn't be engaging in casual sex. Like, that was never the what It was like,
No.
what other birth control what other chemicals can we stuff in your mouth? And so I think that the normalization to me is the problem. Like, people can make
Yeah.
the right decisions for them. If they want to do that, they can do that.
Yep.
But they need to understand that off of birth control, you're going to be a completely different person. And maybe you've heard of like people who have been on birth control for a long time. When they get off of it, they're not attracted to their husband anymore.
Yes. Yes.
Stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's just like, it's very
Scary.
crazy. Yeah, it's very
Mhm.
crazy. So, I mean, I would advise against it, but, you know, that's just my personal preference and belief. I mean, people have to do what's right for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of piggyback off of that for 2 seconds, I believe her name is Alyssa Vetti. She did a podcast, which like blew my mind, changed my mind on like this topic and our cycles and all that stuff. And she talked about the creation of birth control, or she like compared the creation of birth control and the creation of what are the man pills, Viagra. And she was just
Uh-huh.
saying how like when there was any type of slight side effect with Viagra, they said, oh, we got to fix this right away. And the whole birth control, they didn't do as many trials because it's really hard to do things for women when they're fertile. So even like different diets that they have, or just any type of pills or whatever, whenever they do trials, they typically do them on menopausal women because they don't want to mess up your fertility, which is completely understandable. I'm not mad at them for that. But because of that, I think we need to have, once again, informed consent. I think we should know a little bit more about like this thing right here is not as, there's not enough testing on it. There isn't as many, there's so many side effects. I mean, the sheet of paper, I don't remember who put, I think it was maybe Alice Clark posted the sheet of paper of birth control, the side effects. I mean, it's like 3 times this size.
Yeah.
And I just think women and young girls don't know that. I have friends that started even just for acne at like 14, 15 for
Right.
acne. And that is just so crazy. There's so many other ways that it could have been treated than having to do that. So I wanted to bring that in just because you said that and I was like, that is a good point. That is important. All right. One more question, then a question after that. I don't even know. I completely forgot. I hadn't access. What was the turning point? Like, what was the thing that happened that you were like, okay, what I'm doing is wrong. I've got to get out of this and I've got to tell everyone. I don't know why I haven't asked that yet. Sorry.
I got let go from the company. I got laid off along with 12 other people. And at the time, I was already looking for other jobs. Like, I did not want to work there anymore, but I had already kind of set myself up for an expensive life because they paid me so much money that then I was trying to find another job, and I like couldn't find another job that paid me even close to that. So I was kind of stuck. And, you know, I obviously regret staying there as long as I did, but in 2018, there was new legislation passed that basically like made the website illegal. And it was my understanding that, you know, the website would be shut down and this legislation would be enforced. It's called FOSTA SESTA. And that, you know, has still never happened. But I think the real turning point for me was in 2021. I was reached out to by the New York Times and by ABC 2020, and they were covering the Matt Gaetz scandal. I mean,
Fascinating.
yeah. So if anyone is not familiar with Matt Gaetz, he was a Republican congressman from Florida who was allegedly involved in having sex with an underage girl who was procured, who trafficked by Joel Greenberg, his friend, I guess, who Joel Greenberg is currently serving an 11-year sentence for underage sex trafficking and tax evasion, I believe. And so anyway, it was this whole scandal. Like, look it up if you're curious about it. I talk a little bit more about it in the Counterpoints, Breaking Points interview. But after that scandal broke, the New York Times and ABC reached out to me and wanted me to share with them my story. And so I did. I gave them everything I had, and ABC flew me out to New York for this interview, and production was buzzing around me. And I was like, oh, wow, like this story's coming, you know, like these big news conglomerates, the New York Times, like they're going to do what's right. Like, I had so much respect at that time for mainstream media, and I really thought that they were going to give the public this information and let them know that the website is a smoke and mirrors show for what's really going on, which is abusers easily using the website through intentional anonymity. And come to find out, a year or so later, I realized that those stories were not coming out. And here we are nearly 4 years later, and those journalists don't talk to me anymore, and they don't mention the website at all in their reporting of this topic. And it became clear to me that these specific mainstream media organizations, and I think mainstream media in general, is not beholden to public interest or what might benefit you. They're beholden to lobbyists and big pharma and advertisers. And they would prefer to do what's in the financial best interest of the company rather than actually give the public information that would really help them and would make the news and would actually maybe make the DOJ take a look at this website and apply the new legislation that was passed. So yeah, I think that was a real turning point for me when I realized that those stories weren't coming out. I never thought that I would be the one pitching this story and breaking this story to people. Like, I was under the impression that mainstream media would do their jobs, but I was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I definitely would not consider this what I do journalism, but I will say I've had a couple people say to me, like, "Well, I didn't know about this story until you guys talked about it on the podcast," or like, until it was like a topic that you share. And I think that speaks volumes because I'm just a girl, like just a regular girl. I enjoy TikTok. And I think sometimes, like, if I'm talking about something and like mainstream media is not talking about something, that's crazy. That's absolutely insane. Well, I am so glad that you decided to speak up. Like I said to you earlier, and I might have even said on the episode, I don't know, it's been over an hour, but this needs to be heard. People need to hear this. This is something that's so important. And the very final question I have is a question that we ask every single guest that we have. And it is, if every single girl in the entire world was listening to you right now, what is one piece of advice you would give them?
I would tell them not to chase money, because money will not bring you happiness. And it's like you said, it's hard to tell someone that who's in dire straits or in need of their needs being met, and they're below the poverty line or something like that. It's difficult to explain that beyond a certain point, money will not make you happy. It does not bring happiness. And you probably can attest to this, but the wealthy people that I've met, it just makes them empty. And the real happiness that people find is through serving their community and helping others. And that is where you'll really find happiness. So lean into that. Don't lean into making money because, a designer purse or designer digs or fancy trips or social media clout, like, that's not going to make you happy. It might give you a quick dopamine hit, but it really isn't what drives true happiness.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Thank you so, so much, Brooke, for coming on. Seriously, this was a fantastic episode. I truly enjoyed it. If anyone wants to connect with you when they want to, if they want to buy the book, if they want to do the audiobook, we're actually going to do a giveaway for the audiobook, and I will post this graphic for the episode, and then you just comment your favorite part about the episode under that, and then I'll pick a winner from that. But if someone wants to buy that, where can they get it?
It's available on Amazon. There's a Kindle edition, Barnes & Noble. You can buy directly from my publisher, Trine Day. And yeah, the audiobook is on Audible. So I love that giveaway idea. That's so cool.
Thank you. And if someone wants to connect with you, if they want to share their story, or if they just really enjoyed this episode and just kind of want to talk to you about something, how can they get in contact with you?
You can find me on all the socials at Brooke Urick. I have a YouTube channel I just started. All of my social media is brand new. I started it after I wrote the book because I didn't want to be silenced and I didn't really want to give away what I was doing before the actual book was out. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me there. And I actually would love if anyone wants to share their story with me of what happened to them as a result of this website or something like it, because I want to collect these stories. Anonymously, if you so choose. It doesn't have to be like connected to you in any way. But I think it's really important to release our shame and to share what happened, because that's the only data point that these websites can't control, is the number of victims that are out there and the stories they have. And, just know that you're not alone and it's not your fault that something like this happened to you. It happened to me too. And yeah, I would love for anyone to reach out to me and share with me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much again. And everyone, make sure you like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you're listening, and let us know. You can let us know on Spotify and YouTube comments if there was something that was surprising to you in this episode, if you learned something, if you have a story yourself you want to share, just anything, just comment, share this with your friends. I think this is a great episode to share with your friends and I kind of just like a good discussion amongst your friends and just how did this make you feel? Is it something you've thought about? Like, what are other ways? Especially, I like what Brooke said about happiness, about, comparing money and likes and all that stuff to actually helping your community. And, that's big. That's so important to me. I know that personally, I always feel better when I'm doing something for somebody else. Always. There's never a time where it makes me feel worse. So yeah, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff. Everyone have a good day, evening, however, wherever you're listening.